Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating intersection of technology, law, and economics. We're going to look at how tweaking the very nature of computer code could, well, fundamentally change human society as we know it.
So let's kick things off with a pretty big, bold question. What if solving the technical glitches and the rigid rules in blockchain smart contracts is actually the secret to unlocking a post-scarcity world? Now, I know it sounds like a massive leap, going straight from lines of code to a literal human utopia, but the research we're unpacking today connects these dots in a truly compelling way.
To answer that question, our roadmap for today covers 5 key areas. We'll start with the rise of dry code, look at the rigidity of algorithms, explore adding wet code flexibility, discuss human judgment in edge cases, and finally look at a Keynesian post-scarcity future. Let's get right into it.
Part 1, the rise of dry code, automating the rules. We've got to start with this core concept of dry code, which is basically the foundation of smart contracts on blockchain networks today.
To really wrap our heads around dry code, let's compare it to what we're used to. Traditional contracts, they require constant human interpretation. They need that because human language is messy, situations evolved, and words can kind of change meaning over time. Researchers call this linguistic drift. Plus, humans break promises. Smart contracts, on the other hand, are built on dry code. They operate exactly like a vending machine. They rely on ex-ante formalizations, which is just a fancy way of saying all the rules are completely locked in well before anything actually happens. You put the digital coin in, the conditions are met, and the contract executes automatically. It leaves absolutely zero room for bargaining. There are no broken promises here, only broken code.
But what happens when reality doesn't neatly fit into lines of code? That brings us to part 2, the rigidity of algorithms, or when automation fails.
Because here's the thing, total automation can actually lead to incredibly harsh, unforgiving results. Why? Because dry code really struggles with complex exceptions and human nuances. Anticipating every possible weird edge case in a contract is literally impossible. If you try to code for every single contingency, the software just becomes a tangled, overly complicated mess. But if you blindly automate without those conditions, you risk building this dehumanizing, completely inflexible system. Strict algorithmic governance almost always fails minorities or anyone with a unique borderline case.
Take subjective underwriting, for example. Imagine a pig who diligently builds his house out of solid bricks, only to be told by some automated insurance system that his huffing and puffing rates are way down. It's a funny joke for sure, but it hits the nail on the head. Assessing risk usually requires contextual, human judgment. A rigid algorithm might just see a pig, group him with his straw house-building brothers, and slap him with a high-risk premium, totally missing the fact that he actually mitigated the risk.
We see this exact same breakdown in claims adjustments. Imagine getting your fire insurance claim denied simply because you recently got fired from your job. No way, right? It's an absurdly rigid, completely literal interpretation of a word. But it proves that algorithms desperately need human common sense. Without empathy and real-world context, dry code misinterprets intent and completely botches those unpredictable edge cases.
So how do we fix this? That brings us to part 3, adding wet code flexibility to get the best of both worlds. We have to find a way to inject human flexibility right back into the rigid blockchain. We need a balance. On one side, we have wet code that represents traditional law, human interpretation, and all that necessary flexibility. On the other side, we have dry code, the strict, software-driven efficiency. We definitely don't want to throw away the brilliance of the vending machine model, but we absolutely need the empathy of the human mind. The solution the research points to is called a hybrid smart contract, and it's actually a pretty brilliant concept. It's intentionally designed to be an incomplete smart contract. It doesn't try to know everything. Instead, it uses algorithms to manage all the mundane, day-to-day procedures. But, and here is the real game changer, when it hits a complex, borderline gap in its logic, it purposefully pauses and requests human intervention.
The workflow this creates is super smooth. Step 1. The algorithm does all the heavy lifting and routine paperwork without any human friction. Step 2. Boom. It spots an anomaly or an exception it wasn't programmed to handle. Step 3. The code literally halts. It alerts a human, or maybe a decentralized committee, to look at the facts and decide the fairest outcome. It's the perfect marriage of machine efficiency and human judgment.
Which leads us to part 4, human judgment in edge cases, and bringing empathy back into governance. Let's look at why this human integration is so revolutionary. By keeping these hybrid contracts intentionally incomplete, we are actually baking empathy right back into bureaucracy.
That is massive. It protects individuals and minority edge cases from just being paved over by blanket algorithmic rules. Instead of blind execution, where a machine might punish you unfairly over a technicality, the whole system shifts to flexible monitoring. The algorithm watches, but humans step in to decide when things get a bit gray.
The research actually states this perfectly. It says that trying to predict everything in advance, those ex-ante formalizations, can literally never match the flexibility of human decision-making after the fact. You just can't predict every single future contingency using pure code. You need the ability for humans to look at a situation ex post, after it happens, and make a reasonable context-driven judgment.
So, if we scale this entire concept up, where exactly does it lead? That brings us to our final section, a Keynesian post-scarcity future and freeing humanity. If we successfully automate all the mundane economic and legal friction in our society and reserve human effort only for high-level judgment, economic theory suggests it leads us straight toward a post-scarcity economy. That is a hypothetical state where technology manages the grind, all our basic material needs are met with minimal labor, and we are finally free to pursue self-actualization. Imagine never stressing about rent, groceries, or basic survival ever again. This incredible concept was heavily championed by the famous economist John Maynard Keynes way back in his 1930 essay, Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren.
Keynes predicted that once technology freed us from the daily struggle for survival, humanity could fundamentally change. Listen to this quote. He said, "We could discard the struggle for subsistence and instead experiment in the arts of life. Without the need to blindly pursue wealth just to survive, our entire purpose as humans would shift."
Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds straight out of science fiction. Well, it is. This macroeconomic vision is actually mirrored perfectly in the Utopian United Federation of Planets from Star Trek. Researchers literally call it Trekonomics. In a society where hybrid systems provide boundless abundance, the absence of money implies that human status is no longer tied to your bank account or what you can buy.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard hit the nail on the head when he explained this to a wealth-obsessed time traveler from the 20th century. He said, "Material needs no longer exist. The challenge is to improve yourself, to enrich yourself." When a society's material needs are seamlessly met by empathetic technology, our true challenge becomes personal and collective enrichment. We work to better ourselves, not to pile up currency.
So as these hybrid smart contracts gear up to handle the daily grind, effectively blending the raw efficiency of dry code with the empathy of wet code, they might just usher in this era of absolute abundance. And that leaves us with one really profound question to think about today. Once you are finally freed from the mundane, what will you create with your freedom? Something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.